Well, we're very fortunate to work on this project. Moshe Safdie invited us in alongside of some other engineering firms, local engineers in Singapore, RSP, also AIA'19 for environmental work. We did the facades and the structure on the project. I mean, Jewel is really a project along the way of a whole series of grid shells that our firm, BuroHappold, have done and have been increasingly about experience and the space underneath these massive roofs. And I think Jewel has really moved it to the next level, because these structures are not structures really, they're filters. They're balancing an exterior climate and an interior climate. They are trying to make a space, habitable, enjoyable, an experience enjoyable. I mean, hundreds of thousands of people visited Jewel on the first day. I mean, people desire this. They want this. How many times have you walked through a mall and you've been like, oh, I gotta get out of here? It's not a very nice environment, right? I mean, we need to understand that these spaces need to be designed and they need to be considered. But when they are and they're designed well, that people really appreciate them. I think Moshe Safdie just did a phenomenal job at envisioning that space. This idea that you could create a space that has literally rainwater coming into it. This roof ultimately allows the exterior to be interior, but in a way that can create an amazing experience inside. So the roof itself is steel. It's a single layer grid shell, which I think creates a thinness of profile that allows light and thermal comfort really to be to be able to be within the space. Imagine that to be a sort of a double layer or a really thick structure. It just wouldn't have the same feel. So one of the technologies that we employed, that we've been doing for many years now, is developing single layer grid shell technology. What's different about Jewel is it's a very unusual geometry. It has no support in the center. It has a very, very large span. And so we have a lot of different forces flowing through that roof. And the roof changes in thickness. It gets thinner, it gets thicker, it modulates itself, it grows, it responds to the forces. We could not have done that 10 years ago, because the technology that makes that possible is fabrication or computer-aided fabrication of the steelwork itself, which was done amazingly by a Singapore-based contractor and also a German-based contractor to do the nodes. So it really is a culmination of the advances in computer-aided manufacturing to do that type of roof. Also, the geometry is very unusual in that it's not symmetrical. It has a train that runs through it, so the waterfall couldn't be, it had to be off-center. And that created a whole series of problems associated with the panels. And it turns out that we had many, many unique members, but that wasn't a problem, because ultimately the computer-aided manufacturing technologies and techniques that we employed, and the contractors employed, and fabricators employed, allowed them to build basically many, many different pieces, but it went together like clockwork on site. So, I mean, this is, I think, really pushing the boundary of those technologies and shows really what can be done. I would start by saying 10 years ago there was a revolution in technology that we sometimes overlook. 2008, we had so many different things happen. And if it wasn't for a massive worldwide recession a year later, we probably they might have been overshadowed. The iPhone, Android, GitHub, online cloud computing. These things appeared, and so in the 10 years after that, up to today, I think we're starting to see a new process evolve. in architecture. And it's affected our firm quite a bit, because what we originally found that we would have various teams of smaller teams doing computational pieces around our practice. We now have something which we actually call the computational collective, which is sort of mass participation in computation, coding, all of these collaborative elements. You could not collaborate like this 10 years ago. You just couldn't. It was impossible. And today, the tools are there. The network effect is starting. And it's, I think, a really fascinating time. I actually think the role of the architects is getting stronger, not weaker. I actually think the architects, particularly ones that embrace technology, certainly if you're not embracing technology, I think that's dangerous. But I think architectural firms need to be leaders in the built environment. They are the natural leader of an orchestration amongst many professionals. And they have both a broad view, but also a detailed view on what needs to be done to really improve the built environment. And you know, I teach at Columbia University. I tell my students this. I mean, it's up to you. I mean, you need to get out there and lead. And I believe, actually, I believe architects are in as good a position as they've ever been in terms of the ability to really drive technological change at the moment. I think open source will fundamentally change the way that we work. The way that you can have distributed collaborations in open source is just different. You don't have to sit around a table anymore when you're creating code, when you're creating some form of tool. You can be anywhere and everywhere. And open source is just such a powerful concept. It starts to completely break down the hierarchical nature of software, that there's one software piece and everything has to feed into that. Now open source breaks all of that apart, where tools all have to work in tandem with each other. They all have to talk to each other. And by open sourcing, you're sort of improving the collaboration, you're speeding the collaboration up. Now open source platforms and open source software we're just seeing the early stages of how that's going to affect the industry. I do think the other tendency of collaboration is more enticing. We've started something called the Building and Habitats Object Model, or BOM for short, which you can go online, BOM.xyz. It's an open source data exchange, and it helps people just be freeform about their data, and not in terms of a data format, a prescriptive format. That's not what it is. It's a community, it's a collaboration that we started, but we now have external partners that are coming in to add code to that, so that we can actually use that to more effectively work with this sort of all of these open source programs. I mean, this is where collaboration, I think, can be amazing. This is where your firm in Chile, should dive into that and participate in it, because by participating in it, by putting something into it, they can get so much more out of it. It's not about me near me. It's about an idea that you're trying to sort of go beyond the sort of the typical hierarchical walls of software.